Welcome to the channel. We continue our course on learning the Zabbix tool. In this video, we will look at how to monitor MikroTik devices using Zabbix. Before we begin, please support the channel by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving your comment below. This will help YouTube's algorithms better promote my content. Let's move on to the practical part. First, we will configure the MikroTik router for monitoring it using Zabbix. We connect to the MikroTik, go to the IP tab, then to the SNMP tab. A brief explanation of what SNMP is. SNMP, or Simple Network Management Protocol, is a standard internet protocol for managing devices on IP networks. The first step is to click the Communities button and go to the SNMP Communities tab. This submenu allows you to configure access rights to SNMP data. In versions V1 and V2 Celsius's, there is little security, only a plain community string, username, and the ability to restrict access by IP address. Therefore, the first two versions will be considered not secure enough. At the moment, SNMP V3 should be used, as it provides security, authentication, user password, using MD5 SHA-1, encryption using DES, and starting from version 6.16 AEs. Attention! The default settings only have one community named public, with no additional security settings. These parameters should be considered insecure. Therefore, we disable the standard public and create a new community. A small digression. What is a community? In simple terms, a community is essentially an account for authenticating with SNMP. So, we create a new account. In the name field, we write the name by which we will connect. In the addresses field, we enter the IP address or addresses from which connection to the SNMP server is allowed. Here you can enter the IP address of the Zabbix server for maximum security. For example, I will enter zeros. Zeros mean that access is allowed from all IPv4 addresses. The security field should be set to authorized, which means that the connection method involves authorization. Next, we check the read access box, which means that only reading information is allowed. If write access is also checked, then management will also be allowed. But we don't need that since we will only be monitoring the device. Next is the authentication protocol field, MD5 SHA-1 default. MD5. This is the protocol used for authentication. SNMP v3. You can choose either MD5 or SHA-1. You decide which one to choose. I'll just leave it as default. Next is the encryption protocol field, DES default, DES. This is the encryption protocol that will be used for encrypting the connection to SNMP v3. You can choose either DES or AES. Again, it's up to you. The next field is authentication password. This is the password used for authentication when connecting to the server, SNMP v3. And the last field is encryption password, which is the password used for encryption, SNMP v3. The last two fields are different passwords. We click Apply and close this window. Now we will configure SNMP itself. We check the Enable box. This enables SNMP. Next, we need to fill in the following fields. The Trap Community field, where we choose the account we created earlier. And in the trap version field, we choose version 3. In MikroTik routers, the trap version field is used to specify the SNMP version used for sending traps. Trap messages. Traps are messages sent by the SNMP agent, e.g. MikroTik router, to the SNMP manager, e.g. monitoring system, to notify of events or system status. In principle, I won't change anything else here, but if you need more detailed information on all these fields, I'll leave a link to the MikroTik SNMP description in the video description. Now we need to open the SNMP ports. We go to the firewall and create a rule in the input chain. Protocol UDP ports 161 and 162 and allow connections only from the Zabbix server. We raise the rule higher in the chain. That's it for configuring MikroTik. Now let's move on to configuring Zabbix itself. We go to the Data Collection tab, then to the Host tab and click Create Host. Here we fill in the following fields. Host name, where we enter the host name. Write it so that you clearly understand what host it is. Next, we need to choose templates. For MikroTik, we choose MikroTik by SNMP. Then we enter the group. i.e., the group to which these hosts will belong. Next, we add an interface. In our case, it will be the SNMP interface. Here we enter the IP address or DNS name of your MikroTik router. SNMP version 3. Security name, we enter the community name we created on MikroTik. Security level. This point requires a bit of explanation. In the SNMP v3 specifications, a minimum character count, also known as a minimum password length, is required for authentication and privacy, encryption, keys. Determined by the security level and the chosen security mechanisms, SNMP v3 defines 3 security levels: no authentication and privacy, no auth no priv. At this security level, no password or key is required, so the minimum character count does not apply. Authentication but no privacy, auth no priv. At this security level, only authentication is applied and encryption is not used. The minimum character count for the authentication key, password, is typically 8 characters. Authentication and privacy, auth priv. This is the highest security level, where both authentication and encryption are used. The minimum character count for the authentication key is typically 8 characters, and for the privacy key, encryption key, it ranges from 8 to 16 characters. It's important to note that this minimum character count is not a strict requirement of the SNMP v3 standard itself, but rather a practical recommendation to ensure proper security. The actual implementation may have different requirements and recommendations. Additionally, SNMP v3 supports various authentication protocols, such as MD5 and SHA-1, and encryption protocols, such as DES-AES, etc. The specific choice of these protocols can also affect the required key length for authentication and privacy. In our case, we choose AUSPRIV, the highest security level. We enter the number of characters according to the minimum requirements, more than 8. We choose the authentication protocol, the same as the one you chose on MikroTik. Below, we enter the password we set on MikroTik. The privacy protocol is again the same as on MikroTik. And the password you set on MikroTik. The description field is where you can write a description for the specific device. We click Add and wait for Zabbix to connect to MikroTik. This will take some time. A green icon will notify us that the connection to MikroTik is successful and monitoring is in progress. All notifications for each device you have added will be displayed on the Monitoring tab, the Problems tab. You can also view the collected information for each device on the Hosts tab. It's also worth adding that in this way it's convenient to monitor devices when you don't have too many of them, say 10. But what if you have 100 or 200 and you need to change the SNMP passwords on the devices? Then it turns out that you need to go to each device that is in Zabbix and change the passwords there, but that's a real pain. You'll spend a lot of time and nerves, but there is a way out. In this case, we can use macros. Zabbix supports various macros that can be used in different situations. Effective use of macros saves time and makes Zabbix configuration more transparent. In general, the topic of macros in Zabbix is quite extensive, so we may consider it separately. In this situation, we will use user macros. User macros can be defined at the global template level and the network node level. Such macros have a special syntax: curly braces, the $, and the text itself. A user macro has the following functions: macro parameter, macro name. The name must be enclosed in curly braces and start with the $. Example, front and URL. The following characters are allowed in macro names: a Z, uppercase only, 0-9. Value parameter, macro value. 3 types of values are supported. Text, default. A value in the form of plain text, secret text. The value is masked with asterisks, which can be useful for protecting confidential information such as passwords or shared keys. Secret text. The value is masked with asterisks, which can be useful for protecting confidential information such as passwords or shared keys. Vault secret. The value contains a reference path in the form of path key, e.g., secret Zabbix password, to a vault secret. It's done like this. We go to the Administration tab, then to the Macros tab. Here we add new macros. They are written in curly braces with a $sign at the beginning. For example, we write SNMP V3. In the value field, we write the SNMP name that we set on MikroTik. Then we create macros for encryption. Here in the value field, we write the password that we entered in the authentication password field. And we add one more macro for the encryption password. Here we write the password that we entered in the encryption password field on MikroTik. Also, here we can choose secret text from the drop-down list so that these fields are in the form of password input fields. We click Update, and now we can set macros instead of passwords for our devices. It's done like this. We go to Configuration, to the Host tab, add a host, and in the fields we write the macros we created. Security name, authentication, passphrase, privacy, prices rise. After that, if you need to change the passwords on the devices in Zabbix, you only need to go to the macros section and replace the passwords in a few fields, instead of changing all this data on hundreds of devices and spending a lot of time and effort. Here you need to remember that you need to think through all this at the very beginning, before you start adding devices to the Zabbix server for monitoring. I hope I explained it clearly. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. Thank you for your attention.